So when you think of LSU football this year, you think of the high-flying, scoring, the offense going off every week. And yeah, the first people you're going to think of there are Jaden Daniels, Mike Denbrock, the OC, probably Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. But you can't forget about the offensive line. Like, none of what LSU accomplishes this year, being the top offense in the country, putting up video game numbers, Daniels being one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, none of that's possible without the improvement and the consistency that LSU's offensive line showed this year. And they should be awarded for that, and hopefully they will be. Recently, the offensive line was named to the finalist list for the Joe Moore Award, along with Georgia, Washington, Oregon. So they're in the top four. LSU also won this award back in 2019 when the Tigers won the title, and Joe Burrow and that offense were just going crazy. They're putting up the same kind of numbers this year. The only issue is they're 9-3 and not playing for a national championship, unfortunately. Here's a couple key numbers that I found, and I want to compare and contrast why the offensive line was better this year than it was last year. So LSU is the only FBS team, that's one of 132, that averaged 200 rushing yards and 300 passing yards per game this year. The only team to do that. That is very hard to do when offenses are putting up those kind of running yards and passing yards. Like, that is the ideal statistic for every offense. That's what they all shoot for, that kind of balance, that kind of explosiveness in both facets of the game. Not to mention, LSU leads the nation in rush yards per attempt with over 6. And I know you might be thinking, well, that's all Jaden Daniels going for 80-yard runs on a QB scramble or whatever. But the offensive line still has a hand in that. There's no time for Daniels to scramble unless they block well. They hold up their gaps. They win their one-on-one matchups. And, of course, in the run game, too, when Logan Diggs takes handoffs, or Noah Cain, Josh Williams, whoever it may be, they still got to run block well and open up those holes for those running backs to, find open space. Like, Daniels didn't just find this ability to scramble this year. He did it last year, but he wasn't as good at it last year because the offensive line was not as good. Why? Consistency and health. And that was the biggest difference this year. Flashback to last season. LSU's offensive line allowed the most sacks since 1997. It's the worst LSU offensive line in, what would that be, like 25 years. They allowed 45 sacks throughout the season. In 2021, they weren't much better, a little bit better, weren't that good. They allowed 38 sacks that year. And they also only ran the ball for 114 yards per game, 3.3 yards per carry. Like, those are very low numbers. You're not coming close to putting up 200 rush yards per game if that's the case. And the biggest reasons for that, fluctuation in the starting lineup. Last year, only one starter returned to this LSU football team. And they had 10 different guys with starting experience. So, they had some pieces to work with, but they used 5 different offensive line combinations in 6 games. The thing with offensive line, you really can't be moving those pieces around that much. You got to develop that chemistry, that teamwork, and LSU was able to do that this year. In 11 of the 12 games played in the regular season, they had the same starting lineup out there. Emory Jones Jr., Frazier and Dellinger at guard, Charles Turner at center, and then Will Campbell on the outside at left tackle. Those are the guys we saw all year, and they all played well. They were all above 600 snaps this season without a sack allowed. Campbell led the way. 731 snaps for Will Campbell, in which he did not allow a sack. And that's why this offense was so much better. They gave Daniels time in the pocket to create. They gave him lanes to run, escape the pocket, pick up yards. That's why this offense was so good. Because really, even when the defense had a perfect play, they dialed up the perfect blitz, they still could not make a play, and Daniels would make something out of nothing so that every play was either neutral, no gain, or a positive gain. Very few and far between were negative plays. So you got the Outland Player of the Week, Charles Turner. Got that after the Auburn game. He had an excellent year at center there. Garrett Dellinger, Miles Frazier, they had great years at guard. And then the future really looks bright with Lance Hurd, a true freshman who played a little bit this year when Emory Jones went down with an injury against Army. And then even DJ Chester got in against Missouri a little bit. Both those guys, true freshmen. So, you've got some young pieces in Campbell and Jones. I think they both should be back next year. But, they've recruited offensive line well recently. So when they got to restock and, get some more guys out on that line, when guys graduate, guys go pro, the future's looking good. So the winner of this award, Joe Moore Award, given to the nation's best offensive line, will be announced in mid-December. They're supposed to come to the campus and award the winning team with the trophy. And I think these guys are more than deserving for what they did this year, not to mention the consistency and the improvement they showed from last year to this year. I told you in the summer that would be the X factor for this LSU football team this year. I guess the X factor is more so the defense, but still, these guys are the unsung heroes in what LSU's offense did this year, and what they did was have one of the best seasons in college football history for an offense.